Welcome back to another Q&A question and answer. These have been popular videos lately, so why not continue them as I can answer as many questions as possible within a shorter frame of time. So let's get started. The first question is, I have never owned a property before. Can I purchase a buy-to-let as my first property? I'm going to answer this one, I guess, in a few different ways. Now, I'm going to talk about the lending on it. I'm going to talk about the deposit you're going to need. I'm going to talk about strategy. They're the three different things I'm going to cover in the answer to that question. And that is because when you've never bought a property before, you're of course considered slightly riskier to banks because they have no prior history on you. But of course, even to get that history, well, you do have to start somewhere. You do have to get a mortgage somewhere. So the reality is there is absolutely lending available for you to buy a buy-to-let, even if you've never owned your own residential property. But they might be a little bit stricter on certain criteria. They might hope to see someone who is maybe 25 years old. They might hope to see someone who has 25k in savings, someone that has a 25k salary or above, someone with good credit history, and so on. But those are not strict minimum requirements by any means. I have worked with lots of clients over the years, and the thing that I've found is that no one rule fits everyone. I've had people that are 19 or 20 years old that have never owned properties before be able to go on and get lending. And usually it's because they have a balance of other good factors about themselves. So perhaps they're young, but perhaps they've got a good job, good savings, good credit history to be able to sway the lending in their favor. So the first thing is lending. The second thing is deposit, because of course you can do that. You can move past that first property and go straight into buy-to-let, but you're going to need a 25% deposit, which is a much higher chunk of money or capital required for you to get started. Whereas what you could do is buy that first property, and you can buy that with a much smaller deposit. Many first-time buyers buy with 10% and sometimes even 5%. So I do think you're slightly missing a trick or an advantage by buying that first property, because you can buy with a lower deposit. You can buy with no or low stamp duty, and you can certainly take advantage of that kind of first-time buyer status and any of the products that are out there to help you get that first property. Last but not least is strategy. Is this the right move for you? Because a lot of people think straight away about how glorious it might be to buy a buy-to-let, rent it out and earn that passive income. And don't get me wrong, it is great. But are you skipping past something which could be a really good tool to use in your journey? Which again, could be buying that first property, renovating it, adding value, and then refinancing it. Or buying that first property for you to move in, renovating, adding value, selling it, make that profit, and then use that additional money to what you would have had at the beginning to then get further in your buy-to-let journey. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answers your question. Justin, what are your thoughts on rent to rent? And I think someone's trying to stir the pot with this question. I know who sent it in, and I think they're trying to get me to sort of open up and share my thoughts on this strategy. But the truth is, I do not hate this strategy. I just certainly wouldn't be using it myself. And my main thought on this one is the following. I think that every good investor should have two businesses. They should have their investment business and they should have their cash flow business. So for example, I have a buy-to-let limited company. I purchase my properties in that limited company. I've got a couple of them, a couple of limited companies that own my properties. And then on the other side, I've got my sourcing business. And that is what earns the money. That's what pays my way most months. And that's what allows me to continue buying properties over here in my investment business. If I get rid of my investment business, I've got no assets, and now I run a sourcing business, well, not only am I a hypocrite because I'm just sourcing stuff and never buying stuff for myself, but most importantly, all I'm doing is creating cash flow, which is creating short-term money. And everything is reliant on me actively putting time into that, actively running it. And I've got no longevity in that business. I also can't allow for that business to go up in capital growth and make money passively. It's a very active business. So where people get stuck possibly and go the wrong path with rent to rent is they want to do buy-to-lets or they want to do HMOs, and they can't do it either because money's a barrier or because knowledge is a barrier. So instead what they do is they take that time into a short-term strategy like rent to rent, but they get so tied up in rent to rent and trying to create that cash, allow them to leave their job, that they don't do the investment business, and the long-term goal just sort of disappears and dwindles. And I think that's the mistake that people make with rent to rent. Not only that, my other negative towards it is I think, you're constantly taking on other people's, mortgage payments or rent payments, and there's a lot of liability in comparison to obviously the earnings that you're going to be making. Whereas for me, sourcing, if you don't do anything that month, well, you don't pay anything out, but you also don't earn anything. Whereas with rent to rent, if you have a bad month, you don't earn anything, but you also are paying out a lot of costs and money each month. So there's a few different thoughts on rent to rent. It's not my favorite strategy. It's not something I teach. It's not something I come on here and talk about a lot, but that doesn't mean I hate it. There'll be a lot of people saying it's brilliant, it's great. I've, quit my job because of it. I've changed my life because of it. And I massively commend the people that have done that. Next up, do you buy your properties on interest-only mortgages or repayment mortgages? This one's quite simple for me. In fact, I covered a video on this one recently, and I'll put a link somewhere up here where I talk about the longevity of my portfolio and how to create a better portfolio. But I purchase all of my investments, all my buy-to-let properties on interest-only mortgages. And that is because the way that I view mortgages against a buy-to-let property is like good debt, okay? It's not like a credit card, it's not like a car loan, which are technically bad debt. Buying a property with debt, leveraging debt, is technically good debt because you are actually using that money to make more money. And providing you do actually make more money, then that's why we can deem it as good debt. So what I want to do in the early years of my portfolio is to actually make sure that I'm growing as quickly as I can, but then also cash flowing as much as I can so I can reinvest that and grow and buy more properties quickly. So the best way and shape to do that is using interest-only mortgages. Whereas if I was using repayment mortgages, well, my cash flow and my monthly profit would dwindle. I'd find it harder to grow quickly. So in the short term, what I want to do, technically I would say in the first 10 years of my buy-to-let journey, is to continue growing using interest-only mortgages. Whereas as time goes on, as I get years 10 to 15, as I get years 15 to 20 plus years into my portfolio, well, I already know I'm going to switch properties onto repayment mortgages, or I'm going to make overpayments. I'm going to try and reduce that debt because I want for those properties to make more profit, but also because I want to own more of those properties. So not only do I know I want to do that now, but also when I get to that age, I'm pretty sure, that doing what we do day in, day out starts to not get tiresome, but starts to slightly reduce in terms of the level of interest we have towards it. And what we want as we probably grow older is less hassle, more money. So whilst I'm not focusing on repayment mortgages now, I absolutely don't think that's the right way to grow quickly or grow a portfolio. I absolutely will do in the future, whether that's through repayment mortgages or whether that's through overpayments. Next question is, do you need to use bridging finance when doing the buy, refurbish, refinance strategy? And this is a conversation which normally sparks controversy because a lot of investors out there believe that you can do it on a mortgage. And quite often when I talk to people that believe that, are actually correct in saying that you can do it on a mortgage and that they probably have done it on a mortgage, which is why they believe it. And if you find a property which has got a minimal amount of work required, and what I mean by that is maybe it's dated, maybe it's got the kitchen, it's got the bathroom, it's got heating, but it's not in that bad a condition, perhaps it's just simply dated and you've managed to get it at a good price, well, you absolutely can go and get a mortgage on that property. Whereas if you find a property that's maybe got a broken window, it's missing a kitchen, perhaps it's got no heating, well, you're now talking about a property which is unmortgageable. And well, you simply can't get a mortgage. And in fact, you'll look quite silly if you do try and buy that with a mortgage. You're also putting yourself at a disadvantage because when you're making your offer for that property, and you're going up against cash buyers or buyers that are using bridging finance, well, they are in a more ready state to buy that property than you as a mortgage buyer, because you as a mortgage buyer will have more hoops to jump through and a longer timeline. And I know there's lots of people out there that say, oh, you can buy with a mortgage really quickly, but don't care what you say now, there's still a lot of paperwork around it, there's still a lot of hoops to jump through, and it still is one of the longer forms of buying a property. So my opinion is this: not only should we buy and do the buy, refurbish, refinance strategy with bridging for those two reasons, but also because when it comes to doing the refinance, if you are regularly buying properties and 3 months into ownership, refinancing off of a mortgage onto a new mortgage, although there is strictly no evidence that I can provide you with to show this, a lot of brokers will tell you that if you continuously refinance off of a mortgage onto a mortgage, that you are misusing long-term finance and that you could potentially have a flag go up against your name. So I believe that we should be using cash or bridging at every point possible. It not only means that we can buy the properties quicker, we can refinance easier, but it is the way to buy them quicker. And if you're trying to negotiate a good price, you should really try to use that as your leverage. Justin, what's the point in flipping properties if you have to pay tax on your profits? And don't get me wrong, I do not enjoy paying tax in any shape or form, and I'm not sure many people do enjoy paying tax. But you are missing the point, because what you are doing is looking at the negative side of things. Really, what you should be saying is, well, if I've managed to leverage this opportunity and make a good profit out of it, yes, I have to pay tax, which is a bit of a downer, but I've actually managed to make money, which is why I am paying tax on this opportunity. Now, a lot of people would turn around and say, look, listen, if you don't want to pay tax, then of course what you should do is actually refinance the property. Because of course, if you buy the property, you add value, you refinance it, well, you're not paying any tax on your refinance money. But truth be told, what a lot of investors don't talk about enough is that in every investor's journey, there will become a time and a place in which we should all flip properties, because capital, money, is always going to be a finite thing. We're always going to run out. We're always going to need to find more money to buy property. And we can do that through many different forms. We can do that through raising money. We can do that through joint ventures, and they are fantastic methods of doing so. But again, eventually you are going to be leaving chunks of money in this property, leaving chunks of money in that property, and eventually those funds will dry up. So what we should always look to do as a business person, as a property investor, is look for ways in which we can replenish that capital quicker and not just rely on finding other partners. And we can do that in the shape of having a cash flow business. Okay, if we have a very successful business and it pumps out cash, that cash can replenish any capital that we are missing. But we can also do that through doing flips. And for a lot of investors that are full-time investors, or perhaps they work and they're doing investment on the side, doing a flip is a really, really good strategy and method to use if you are looking to rebuild that war chest of capital. I always refer to it as a war chest, because if we can have this big chest of money, then every time we go and do a deal, we are in a better position in terms of our buying power, in terms of our position to buy it, because we're potentially cash, we're not mortgage. And it means that we have a bit more money to play with. It means that we don't have to worry about being strict on certain finance lines. We don't have to worry, panic about, oh, I'm going to leave too much money in there, I'm going to run out of money, which can often cause more problems than not. Whereas those people that you're competing with who have very limited funds, they could potentially make more mistakes because they're trying to stick within that limited budget. And that mistake could be buying the wrong property, doing the wrong kind of refurb, and not accounting for the correct amount of time to own that property before they're able to sell it or refinance it. So what we want to do as investors is think about the long term. We want to think about how having more capital plays into our hand as an investor. It helps us out. So therefore, there will be properties along the way that we should flip in order to replenish that capital of money. And what we need to realize that in the long run is that will allow us to go on to buy more buy-to-let properties for our portfolio. But that is it for today's video. If you've enjoyed it, if you want to see more of these, if you want to ask your own question, make sure to put it in the comments box below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in next week's video.